Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm Lisa with Lisa Capen Quilts, and today we are making the Snowman Trivet. Now, if you made the chicken trivet, then you're going to find this so super duper easy. But if you didn't make the chicken trivet, I think you're still going to find this super duper easy. We're making this trivet with no opening to sew closed. It is going to go by quick, and it's a lot of fun. So stay tuned for that. Y'all, as fast as I can blink, the days are going by before we get to Christmas. And it seems like the older I get, the more even faster the days are going by. And I used to be really young and I'd hear my elders in the family say how fast time went by. And when you're younger, you think, oh, they're just being so silly. But it's so true. The days are going by so fast. I know I don't put out as many videos as I once did or as in the recent years, but just know that every day I think about you. And I want you to know that I appreciate you and I pray for you every day. I think about you every day. And I'm just so thankful for the online community that we have formed through these YouTube videos, through Facebook, through Patreon, all of those ways that I've come to connect with you. I'm so grateful for that. And I just want to wish you a Merry Christmas. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and just jump down and start on this trivet. And yeah, it should be a lot of fun. So what you have is a PDF pattern for this trivet. The first page tells you all the measurements if you like to pre-cut all of your pieces, right, and have everything ready to start sewing. That's what is on the first page. And then you'll also notice there's two additional files, right? So for those of you who have cutting machines like your Cricut and your scan and cut machines, there are SVG cutting files that cut out the applique for you, which speeds up the process. And that's what I've done today to cut out my applique pieces. If you have never seen that process before, several weeks back, we were doing baby applique blocks, right? And if you go back all the way back to the one where I did the duck, there's a little duck applique. In that video, I showed you the whole process from working with the SVGs in Canvas Workspace, sending it wirelessly to the cutter, cutting out and prepping my fabric, using two different cutting mats, what to do if the paper sticks on the mat, and I cut out all of those applique pieces. So if you've sort of been on the fence about a cutting machine and you're wondering, is it worth it for me and what I do in my crafting room or my sewing room, or you're just wondering about the process, you could go check out that video, and I'm going to try to remember to put a link right in the description box so you could just click on that and go check it out. But that's how I cut out my applique pieces for this Snowman Trivet, but there are tracing files in this PDF. You don't have to have a cutting machine. Okay, that was a lot of words. Are y'all ready to get started? Let's come on over to the cutting mat or the pressing board. Here is my PDF. In this PDF, there's 4 pages that you need to cut out and tape together, right? I use glue because I'm actually going to sew on this today. Now, in the chicken trivet video, I cut this whole thing out on the outside line, which you could certainly do with this pattern, and traced that onto my fabric and removed the paper altogether and used a 1/4 inch seam right along the edge to sew that base shape, right? You could certainly do that. You could cut this snowman right out on the outside black line. Then you'll have a template that you can lay on your fabric and trace with a pen or marker or chalk on your fabric and remove this whole thing and reuse your template over and over again. But I also want to show you this pattern has a pink line, and I'm going to sew directly on that pink line, and I think it's going to help my accuracy, and I don't have to trace all of this onto my fabric. The only downside is once I use this, it's done, right? I'm going to rip and remove this off of the fabric just like I was doing paper piecing. So if I wanted to make more of these, I would just print these 4 pages over again and tape them back together to make another one, right? 2 different ways that you could use this template. So I have already bonded these 4 pages together. I have the template for my base. What I have here is 2 layers of fabric. So I'm going to use this as the back of my base and the front of my base. You could match these 2 fabrics the same like I did, or you could use 2 different fabrics, right? I need to give this a press before I work with it. And then I have 2 layers of warm and natural batting. I tend to work a lot with this because I have lots of it on hand extra, right? Because I'm doing a trivet with my snowman, I do have 2 layers and that works pretty well. You could substitute 2 layers of batting for Insulbright or any of those insulated battings to use like in hot pads and trivets and things like that, right? You could swap that out for this if you want. But that's what I have right here, and this is going to make up the base that we are putting all of the applique on to, right? So simple. Let me go ahead and just pull this off. You'll also see tracing templates. They all have been mirror imaged, right? You do have written instructions, but if you're like me, I learn better from watching someone do it. And to be really honest, even though I write all these instructions, sometimes when I read it, I just don't make sense to my own self. That's why I think the videos are so helpful. But your applique templates have been mirror imaged. You're ready to trace them. They have been numbered. And here's the little guide of where the placement, all these pieces go, right? So you can say, well, where does this piece go? Piece number 2, that's his button. So they have been numbered, and there are your tracing templates. Let me warm up this iron. I'm going to give these 2 fabrics just a quick press, right? I'm not going to go overboard. I just want to give them a press, and we can chit-chat while I'm pressing them. They have some pretty hard folds, so I just want to remove those before we get started. It is chilly in here today. Y'all know, or most of you know, this might be your first time watching. Recently we moved, right? We moved to this house out. Shout out to Matthews, Virginia, right? But I guess it's been 6 or 7 months ago we moved here. And y'all know the first year you move into a house is really the most eye-opening year of getting to know your new house, right? This house is not new. This house is over 100 years old, the main part of the house. But it's new to us, right? And so whenever you move, there's always this discovery period, learning what, every house has its own little noises it makes, right? It has its own little characteristics and things that it does. So this has been a year of discovery for us with this house. I experienced my first summer in my new quilting studio and learned how hot it gets in here. And this is my first winter in this house. And today, the day I'm filming this is the first day of winter, or was that yesterday? This winter, I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like already, just based on what we've experienced, this winter is going to be colder than the last few winters. I might be wrong, but I kind of feel like it's already gotten colder for December versus the last few Decembers. I don't know. But it's the first winter in this studio, and it is cold out here. I have thick, warm socks on, and y'all know I usually go barefoot, even in the wintertime. I have some thick, warm socks on. I have 3 different heaters going on, but we do have someone coming to install a propane heater in my studio because it is so cold out here. Like at the end of the day, my hands hurt, my shoulders hurt, My shoulder hurts anyway here recently. I think I have quilter shoulder. Is that such a thing? But it's cold out here. All right, enough rambling, Lisa. I've pressed my two pieces, right? The back and the front of the base. So what I'm gonna do is, I got thinking about how cold it was out here and I've lost track of what I was doing. I'm gonna bring in my 2 layers of batting, right? And I'm going to lay down the back of the base of this trivet with the right side of the fabric facing up. Okay, just like that. And then I'm going to take the front of the base, and to be honest, the front of the base of this trivet, you're only going to see just a small little bit showing through. So if you have fabric that you don't really like, this is a great use for it. I'm going to take the front of the base of this trivet and I'm going to lay that with the right side facing down. And what I'm going to do, because we're placing applique over everything, is before I create the layers, let's go ahead and cut a little slit. And that slit is what we're going to use to turn this right side out when we're done. So right in the middle, I'm just going to poke a hole with my seam ripper and just cut myself a small little slit. Now we can make that bigger if we need to. Once all of the shape of this trivet is sewn, I feel like it'll stabilize the fabric a little bit. If we need to make it bigger, there goes Poppy. We can do that at that point. Let me go get him a box to play with. So he will be occupied, but that's his way of saying Merry Christmas to everybody. Hold on a second. All right, I don't know if that's going to work or not, but he's preoccupied for a second anyway. So we have the little turning slit, and we're just going to line everything up. Just finger press it nice and flat. And I'm going to take my paper pattern, right? And just center that right over top of that slit. And then I'm going to use some pins just to keep everything in place. Right? I don't want to sew over these pins, so I'm going to just kind of put them out of the way of that pink line, but I really just want to anchor all of these layers so nothing shifts around. For those of you interested in a chicken update, today we have a new brown egg. We've been getting 2 eggs a day from 2 of our girls who were laying when we got them, right? They were old enough. But we raised some little baby chickens. And today was the first egg from one of them. We knew they were getting close. But today we got a new egg. So that's exciting. I know Harlan was so disappointed. He's gone into work today, right? But he works from home a lot. He has an office and he works from home a lot. And he does, I mean, just being honest, he does most of the chicken maintenance, right? The chickens were his idea. I just happen to fall in love with the chickens. When he goes on work travel, I take care of them. But primarily, he is the chicken caretaker. But so he went into work today, and today I found the new egg. I know he's a little disappointed, and I feel bad about that, but isn't that exciting? Okay, so we're going to bring this over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew directly on this pink line, so I don't have any tracing to do. But because I'm sewing through the paper and I want to make it easy to remove the paper when I'm done, I'm going to lower my stitch length so that my stitches are really close together. Now keep in mind, I'm going through paper, 2 layers of fabric and 2 layers of batting. So I do have a 90-14 size needle in my sewing machine. You might want to up the size of your needle too. And I'm also sewing with a polyester thread, which in my opinion is a little bit stronger than a cotton thread. I could be wrong. You could have different experiences, but that's what I have found in my sewing. So that's the needle and the thread I'm using. And you could certainly cut out your trivet pattern right on the pink line and pin it in place and sew next to the paper if you want to, or cut out your trivet pattern on the black line, trace that onto your fabric with a pen or marker or chalk, and then remove the paper altogether and sew on that line like we did with the chicken trivet, right? I'm just bringing this right to the sewing machine, and we're going to move over there right now. I'm sorry, y'all, my back is twisted. I have done something to my back. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't feel fabulous at all. All right, I'm going to lower my stitch length. And I'm going to start off with a 1.6 stitch length, and I'm going to see if that's close enough together. I really don't want my stitches to bind up with all of these layers, but I do want to be able to remove that paper fairly easy, right? Plus, a shorter stitch length is going to really help you maintain all of the curvy parts and shape to your trivet base. So having a shorter stitch length will help. Now you can pick anywhere to start. I'm going to just start right here. And we are sewing right on that pink line. Now you'll see I'm not going to do a back stitch when I start, because when I go all the way around, I'm going to come to that starting point and I'm going to just sew right over it a few stitches, and then I'll do a back stitch then. I think the 1.6 stitch length is working great for my machine. So you might want to check that out. If you feel like you're not moving anywhere, try increasing that by a little bit. And of course, all of our machines are a little bit different. Now I'm going to go ahead and speed this part up, but I want to bring you along sewing the entire shape. All right, here's where we started, right there where that thread is hanging. I'm just going to pass it to about right here, do a couple little back stitches, and that will lock everything in place, and we will be done sewing around the base. So there we go. And I particularly like to sew on that pink line because sometimes my tracing can be a little bit off. And for me, I just feel like the accuracy of sewing on that provided line makes it a little bit easier for me. The only downside is if I want to make another one, I'm printing off of these 4 pages and just making another template, right? Okay, so let's come on over here to the pressing board, and I'm going to remove these pins. And that worked really well to just keep those layers in place as I sewed around. And now I am just removing this paper. See how easily that comes off? That 1.6 stitch length just sort of pre-cut the paper for me, right? And I don't really have to tug too much on those stitches for the paper to come off. That's my little thread. I need to just cut that. This is one reason why I like using glue to bond my templates together, right? Because had I used tape, I'd be sewing through the tape, and it also would be harder to remove if you have sewn through the tape. So there's that. Now I'm just going to pull this up. Now, what's really nice is if you can remove this whole piece without ripping it, you could just pin this to the next one you want to make and just sew right next to the paper edge. And you don't have to trace it as well, right? So if you remove it in one piece, you get lucky and you don't have to sew through the paper the next time, right? I'm going to save that because I think I might want to make a couple of these. So what we have left is the sewn shape, and you can just see the outline. And it goes through all the way to the other side. Now I'm going to go ahead and just take a pair of scissors. You could use pinking shears, and I'm going to trim all the way around all of this extra fabric and batting, leaving a very small allowance, okay? And in these little parts that come into the shape of like a V, right? In those valleys, I'm going to take a pair of scissors and just snip that seam allowance to hopefully get a nice little flat finish when we turn this right side out. And I will probably also trim the seam allowance on the curvy parts as well. I think it just helps that seam lay a little bit flatter when you turn this right side out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll be right back. Okay, we're coming back. Now I'm going to give you a couple pointers as I trimmed all of those seam allowances, right? These little Fisker scissors, These are great. I discovered these when doing rag quilts. If you've made a rag quilt, you know how exhausting it is to trim all of those seams to make the quilt rag, right? These are spring-loaded, and the blades are excellent for cutting through thicknesses of batting and fabric, and they cut very close to the very tip. So they're really great for cutting layers. And I just used these in all of the inward points or curves to just clip close to that stitch line, right, without cutting the stitch. But I also removed little nuggets, so hopefully these curvy bits will lay a little bit flatter when we turn this right side out, right? So at this point, we can just go ahead and reach in and turn this right side out. I'm going to make that cut a little bit bigger, just like that. And that makes it easier for me to just pull everything right side out. So let me do that. There we are with our base, and I just took a chopstick and went around and just pushed out all of those edges. And now I'm just going to take a good hot iron and go through and just give these turned edges a little press so that they'll lay a little bit flatter. Now I'm someone who likes to use steam, so I'm just going to take a little bit of steam and just press nice and flat. Inevitably, I have a little pucker right here and a little pucker right there, which I knew when I was drawing this snowman base out that I always get a little pucker in little places like that. I think that's okay though. And then I'm just going to press that little opening so that those edges lay a little bit flatter right there. So there is the base of our trivet, right? There's the back. It is perfect. The opening is going to be covered by our applique. Now all these scraps you saw me cut off, I'm an applique quilter, so these are not going in the trash. I save all of this because this is great pieces of fabric for bits of applique. So this will be saved. I'm not throwing that away. All right, so here are my applique shapes. Now I did not do a placement guide for your applique. You know, I like to press my applique and make it into one shape generally, but because these two pieces cover up everything, you really wouldn't be able to use a placement guide for all of the other pieces anyway. So there is no placement guide for this particular pattern. So I'm just going to show you how I'm going to lay out all of these pieces. I did not take the paper off before filming, so I'm just going to remove the heat and bond paper from the back side. This is one tall tale sign that I need to clean my scan and cut mat. Usually when I remove the applique, when I'm cutting with my cutting machine, the paper sticks to the mat. Yesterday, when I cut out all of these pieces, the paper and everything was lifting right off the mat. So I know that it is time to clean the mat. All right, so there's those two pieces, and I'm just going to bring this right over here. Because if you want, you can use the picture on the front page of the pattern as a little placement guide, right? So we know the head is going to be above the body. So let's just sort of start placing those pieces. Here is the big part of the scarf. And I can see the scarf sits over his body, but underneath of his chin. So something like that. That's going to be super cute, right? Here is the other part of the scarf. And I'm just taking a straight pin and just scoring the paper on the back, and then it comes off very easily. And I'm not pulling and tugging at the raw edge of the applique piece. This part of the scarf sits on top of that, but tucks up underneath of his head. So like that. For me, it's all going to blend in until we stitch this down. And then I have the top of his hat. Which we're going to just preliminarily put that right there. I guess I should have removed all the paper before I started filming. It would have saved a little bit of time. This is the rim of the hat. So that's going to go like this. It's going to go over top of his head. And this tells me I need to scoot this down just a little bit, right? Let's scoot it down there. This is going to go, see the shape of his hat? That brim of his hat should fill in about the same shape, right? And then this is getting tucked up under. That's going to be so dang cute. Okay, so we have his nose, which I used like a burnt orange piece of fabric for. Goes there. And the top of his hat is going to sit on top. This is like his little pom-pom on his hat. So that's super cute. Before I move on, I don't want to forget, he has his two little arms that I've cut from brown fabric, like sticks. That bird, he was quiet all morning long. I'm tucking the arms right up underneath of his body. He was quiet all morning long. And it's like he knows that I'm filming. I know he can hear me talking, so he's like, who are you talking to? Why am I not a part of this conversation? Now, at this point, I think I'm going to go ahead because I'm really happy with the placement with all of these pieces. So I don't keep moving them around, I'm going to go ahead and fuse what I have at this point, right? Let me scoot you over. And let me scoot this over just a tiny bit. Just so that it primarily is the same amount of base fabric sticking out all the way around, right? We're eyeballing it. And I'm just going to fuse these pieces so I don't bump them around. Now what's really great is we've covered that opening underneath of the body, so we don't have to worry about that. And then we have the cuffs. We're going to set those there. We have the mittens. So I'm going to place my mittens down first and then place the cuff of the mitten over top of that. I'm going to leave a little gap there, and that gap will be covered by the cuff of the mitten. And you know what? I think I'm going to go ahead and fuse those in place so I don't move them around when I'm putting the cuff in place. My shaky little fingers, if I don't fuse as I go, then I'm moving everything. All right, and so then we can place the cuff there and the cuff there. Isn't that just the cutest? My Nana would have loved that green polka dot fabric. Polka dots were one of her favorites. Now I'm just kind of pre-fusing these. I do think I really need to go through once everything is in place and really fuse this well, right? But I'm just kind of keeping them from moving around as I'm placing everything. All right, we have the 2 buttons, which you could actually omit cutting them from fabric and use real buttons. That would be super cute. Because I intend to use this as a trivet, I did not want to use the buttons so that if we laid a casserole or something on this, it would have a flat surface. But if you're just making this for decorations, real buttons would be super cute. Those are going to go right on his belly like that. And then we have the face details. So we have the white fabric for the eyes. I was hoping, yeah, it looks like there's enough contrast. I was hoping that there would be enough contrast between his body and the eyes. But even if you were to use the same fabric for the body and the eyes, when stitching the outline of the eye, you're going to get that outline, right? We have the tiny little thin mouth. And he's got just a funny little grin. I'm just looking on the camera because sometimes it looks a little different versus looking at an angle like this. I'm going to fuse those pieces down. And then we have the inside of the eyes. And those match up right to the edge of the eye. Isn't that so cute? He looks cold, doesn't he? Y'all, I have a feeling we're going to be really cold this winter. And then the little pupil, white parts of the eye. There we go. Those are in place. Now I'm going to just go through and fuse everything down really well. Just kind of been tacking it as we go. But I want it to all be fused, all the edges to be fused down. Now what's really awesome about this is when we stitch down all this applique, we're also going to be quilting this trivet all at the same time. Y'all know that's my favorite. It just taking care of 2 steps at once. There we go. Now, I have some black fabric pieces. I think a black thread to sew down everything would tie in with his mouth, his eyes, and the buttons. But not only that, would give a nice defining line or outline to each one of these applique pieces. Now, I hadn't really thought about what stitch I was going to use up into this point, but I do think I'm going to use a blanket stitch for the bigger parts of applique. And then, because I like using a free motion stitch, that's what I'm going to use for parts like his mouth. Maybe. I don't know. Let's see when we get over there. I don't want to commit to anything just yet, but I do know I'll be using a blanket stitch for my applique. So let me change out the color of my thread and we will be right back. Okie dokie, we're here at the sewing machine. I have a black thread in my bobbin and in my top thread. It is a polyester thread. I primarily sew with the polyester thread. But yeah, that's what I'm using. And I have put on my open toe foot. And I'm going to go ahead and pick out a blanket stitch. I want one that's spaced out a little bit and one that comes into the applique just a little bit, right? So let's go ahead and play with some settings. I like to do that on just a scrap piece before I bring in my project. I don't know if you can see that, but I kind of like that a lot. So let's go with that. Spaced out quite a bit. And we'll come into the applique just a little bit. So for my particular machine, the width is a 2.0 and the stitch length is a 2.8. Now I'm going to go ahead and start on, ordinarily I would start on the little arms, but I think this particular stitch, nope, let's go ahead and do it. I'm going to start on the two arms and then I'm going to stitch down his belly and his mitts. I'm going to bring you along, but I'm going to speed up this process. I am willing to bet that I spend about an hour sewing down all of these pieces because I really like to take my time and enjoy the process. But you don't want to sit here for an hour and watch me stitch these down, right? So I'm going to speed this part up. And until I slow down, I'm going to be using that same settings with the blanket stitch, right? Okay, that was a lot of sewing, but it was so much fun. I haven't sewn any applique for like over a week now, so that was kind of like therapy for me. I used the same blanket stitch, 2.0 width, 2.8 on all, length, on all of the pieces you just saw me stitch out, and it made such the cutest little outline for the eyes and all the pieces. Right now, what I have left to this point are the little whites of the eye and the mouth, and I think I'm gonna just switch over to a zigzag stitch and sew those pieces down. So let me just find myself a small little zigzag stitch. Remember, we're going through quite a few layers, so I can't make it too small, but I feel like it needs to be not very wide for certain parts of the mouth. And I was gonna just switch over to a free motion foot, but let's just pick a zigzag stitch. Actually, I think that will work. I'm getting lucky picking my stitches right off the bat. Something small like that. I know it's hard to see because the camera's focused for the needle. 2.0 is the width of this zigzag stitch, and a 1.0 is the length. If you like the look of the stitch, you could start there with your settings and then adjust from there. And I'm going to go ahead and stitch the two whites of the eye and the mouth, and that's all we have left. All right, that is all of our applique stitched. Let's take a good little look at our finished trivet, and I think I will probably want to give this a press. So let me just heat up my iron again. There we are. Isn't he just so cute? That's adorable. I have tons and tons of little jump stitches to clean up on the back, and the little threads that when I use my thread cutter, it ties a knot on the back. That's why you don't see me doing lots of back stitching when I jump from one place to another, because I use my thread cutter. But my particular thread cutter leaves little threads where it ties the knot on the back, so I have to go through and just manually trim those up. And it can look like a big hot mess when you turn everything around, and sometimes even it creates a little burr of thread, which isn't the most attractive thing in the world. So I have a love-hate relationship with my thread cutter, but usually if I'm recording a video, I use it because it's faster than doing back stitch it every time I jump from one place to another, right? But just quickly trimming all of these threads up so we can get a good idea of the finished look on the back. But yeah, as I stitch down all of this applique, we have quilted this trivet. And because I used 2 layers of batting, there's a nice little texture. I mean, you really can't see the texture through the screen, right? But it just feels so quilty. And yeah, that's super cute. Now I really feel like I could spend a little bit more time cleaning things up on the back, but I just wanted to give you a quick look. of what the back looks like using that blanket stitch and a zigzag stitch, right? So that's super cute on the back side as well. And I like using a dark color most of the time for my stitching because it just creates an outline and separates the pieces even more. If you don't want to see on the back side all of that stitching, right, you could coordinate the colors of your thread. They don't have to outline your pieces like what I like. You could use different colors of thread for each of the different colors of fabric you've used. And so all of that stitching just blends in, right? We all like different things. And I'm just going to give this a press. Now, y'all, my iron gets super duper hot, right? I have it on max, which is above the wool, above the cotton, and above the linen setting on my iron. Now, I've never taken a temperature reading of what the iron is, but she's hot. I don't know that it's as hot as a casserole that's coming right out of the oven, right? And I mentioned that I used a polyester thread to sew together the base, right? And I've used a polyester thread to sew down my applique. And I've always used, I have very, very little cotton thread in my studio at all. Most of my thread is a polyester based thread. Now, would this thread withstand the heat of a frying pan that you've just cooked some bacon in? Probably not, right? But if you were to take a casserole out of the oven and put it on top of your oven, right, while you're setting up your dinner, and then you put this trivet on your table, and after a few minutes you set your warm casserole dish on this trivet. I have done it many, many times. I've never had a problem with any of this thread melting. It can withstand a good amount of heat, right? I'm using my hottest setting from my iron, and I'm pressing right over top of this thread, and there's no craziness going on. But if the thought of using a trivet that has polyester thread worries you, by all means use a cotton thread. And by all means, if you were to make this and you think, this is something I could put in the microwave and use, right, as a hot pad, I would use a cotton thread, right? I wouldn't put the polyester in there. And to be really honest, I don't know how the heat and bond adhesive on the backside would withstand microwaving either. I don't know. But as a trivet, I feel very confident using the polyester thread. And I just wanted to say that because it was something I was thinking of while I was sewing. And I didn't want to close the video without talking about that first. Okay, everybody, there is the Snowman Trivet. I hope if you make this that you have lots of fun. I'm going to be using this in my lineup of trivets that I've made this year, including the chicken trivet at Christmas time when the kids come and my brother and his family come. The Snowman Trivet will be on the table waiting for something yummy to be placed on top of it. I'm all about the food. All right, let's come back. I think that's super cute. I hope that you have fun with this. I hope you have a very Merry Christmas. And I'll look forward to 2024 with you. To me, I feel like, or I'm thinking that 2024 is going to look a little different for me. I think it's time that I slow down a little bit. To be really honest, I'm just out of a lot of ideas. I have a few good ideas, but I don't have 52 ideas to do weekly. And the thought of trying to force myself to do that stresses me out a little bit. I think, moving to this house was the slowdown that I really needed. And while I don't want to stop coming and visiting with you and doing fun, creative projects, I do think a slowdown is needed for me. So we are not stopping videos in 2024. but it's going to just be a refreshing year for me. Do you know what I'm saying? And I hope that for you, when you watch videos next year, it will be fun for you too. I mean, that's my goal, really. And the person in charge of my schedule is me. So if I'm stressed out with my time, I don't have anybody else to blame except for myself, right? So I think slowing down, and while we might meet once a week, I don't know that we're doing patterns once a week. So I look forward to the changes in 2024, and I'm hoping that it's refreshing. I feel like I've said a lot. Merry Christmas, everybody. Have fun. If you make this trivet, I'd love to see it over on Creative Crew. Please share your pictures. I'd love to see what you're doing. Not just of this trivet or my patterns, but whatever you're working on, we want to see it. So feel free to share. All right, everybody, until I see you next time, have fun sewing and creating. Bye.